With rising demands for environmentally and financially sustainable agriculture, many people have sought natural gardening techniques as cost-saving and eco-friendly alternatives to conventional approaches. But does natural gardening actually work? Some gardeners swear by their natural techniques, boldly proclaiming that any newer garden inputs from the past 100 years are unnecessary and unsustainable to making healthy soil. Others claim that most of the world would be living in starvation without modern agricultural inputs. So who's right? Well, both are. On the one hand, we are heavily reliant on synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and mechanical tillage and inorganic mulches. On the other hand, these approaches are rapidly depleting soil biology and nutrient contents and potentially adding to chronic illness in people caused by forever chemicals being sprayed directly onto plants. Yikes. So what's the solution? Well, over the past few decades, with the abundance of natural gardening techniques, there is one that stands out as truly unique in that it combines newer technologies designed to solve modern problems while still relying on ancient natural farming techniques to improve soil health. So here's how natural gardening could actually work. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Taylor. If you're new here, I have been exploring techniques for natural gardening or natural farming approaches ever since I got started. Cassidy and I really like trying to save costs wherever possible. We also are really passionate about the environment and just eco-friendly processes, holistic gardening techniques, all of the buzzwords we really like. So when we first started getting gardening, we were looking for ways that we could just get started with as little money as possible and as few inputs and just do it as naturally as possible. Now, what we came to find out is that there's two main camps when it comes to gardening and agriculture more broadly, but we're mostly gardening on our scale. So the two camps are the conventional and the natural. Let's start with the conventional side. Conventional gardening relies heavily on synthetic chemical amendments. So these are things that are made in labs. They consist of fertilizers and pesticides, herbicides, disease-fighting chemicals that are created to just kind of treat plant health as it is. If you put a plant in the ground and it has problems, you can go to the store and just buy whatever you need to solve the problem on the plant. On the other side, we've got natural gardening techniques. Even just the natural gardening philosophy would actually say that, well, if your plant is struggling, it's because you've got a problem with your soil and maybe more broadly your environment, your microclimate. So that could be things like you've got an imbalance in your pests. Maybe you need some more predators in your area. Or maybe your soil doesn't have the nutrients that it needs in it, so let's find natural ways to bring up nutrients from the bottom, lower levels of the soil and bring them up into the top. So we're going to implement things like heavy mulching with organic materials and all of that stuff. So these are the kind of two sides. Conventional gardening looks a lot like this. When you start a new bed, a new garden bed, you are going to break up the ground because likely it's been walked on. If it's on your property, it's been trampled on and compacted in the soil is not going to be workable. So you need to implement mechanical tillage, which just means you bring in a rototiller, you work up the ground, the soil gains tilth overnight or gains the texture that it needs. And then from there, you just plant your plants in the ground. More than likely, what happens is that if you're just planting into a brand new spot, the soil isn't really ready to be able to handle the plant. So you go to the store to try to find a solution. And a lot of the solutions are maybe you just need to get a fertilizer. So you buy a synthetic fertilizer that can introduce into the soil around the plant, or maybe you spray it on the plant and it gets the nutrients that it needs all of a sudden and boom, it grows and it works. Produces fruit or veggies or whatever you're trying to get. And then, that applies to all the other kind of techniques all the other problems that you might face as well. So if you have a pest problem, then you go to the store and you just buy a pesticide, spray it on the plant and it works. If your plant has a disease, you go to the store and you buy something else to spray on it and it solves the problem. It's a highly effective approach, the conventional approach, in that you are getting an immediate solved problem every time. We have the technology for it where people have been using these for decades, for probably over a century now. and you just have to go to the store and you can find what you need to solve your plant problem. So on the conventional side, you're really just, your costs would be money, and you're saving a lot of time, maybe, and physical effort, but you're also, another hidden cost would be just a general cost to the environment. So a lot of these chemical or synthetic sprays that you're going to put on your soil or on your plant are actually going to be harmful in the long run. They might disrupt the natural ecosystem around you, or the runoff is going to cause harm to native wildlife and whatnot. And on top of that, they're not really very sustainable, because when you blast your plant with the synthetic fertilizers, they don't stay in the soil because you've already obliterated the soil because you had to spray an herbicide on it. And so all the biology around is gone. You're just giving your plants the nutrients at the base level. Their roots don't have to really develop. So you end up being reliant on all of these inputs from the store every year. Again, that's not to say that they're not effective in actually getting the result that you want, which is more food, but they aren't sustainable by definition. They're not even claiming to be necessarily. The manufacturers know that you're going to be coming back year after year to buy them. That's their business model. So that's the conventional side. The natural gardening side comes along and says, never use any of that because it's devastating to the environment. It's not all the reasons that I just mentioned. It's not sustainable. Instead, you've got all these, an abundance of natural techniques that you could use that mostly involve using plant debris and waste, otherwise waste products that you would maybe be keen on throwing in the recycling bin or in the yard waste bin. You can actually, your natural gardening techniques say, you've got everything that you need on site, just keep it, and you can kind of process that material and make natural mulches, and you can make your own amendments. Maybe permaculturists would say that you need to observe the natural processes happening in your yard and see, what pests and predators and all of that exists, and when do the critters come out and whatnot. And then you can kind of decide how you engage with your little microclimate. When you implement these natural gardening techniques, a lot of the time you are saving on money, and you're also doing it in an eco-friendly way. What you're sacrificing, or what your cost is, or could be, is in just overall production level. You're not going to probably get the amount of food super quickly, because that's not necessarily even your priority compared to the conventional approach. You're actually going to have to wait a lot longer, and even then plants are going to be more susceptible to pest pressure and disease and all that, because you're not spraying it with the chemicals that you could buy at the store. So we're at kind of this tricky crossroads where we actually do want to get something from our labor, but we don't necessarily want to be reliant on these processes. And so what's the solution? Well, let me tell you, there are so many ways that people say that you can garden naturally or farm naturally. We cover a lot of them on this channel. We have in the past, and we will continue to do so. But there's one that we have been especially reliant on and thankful for, and that is the JADAM organic farming approach. JADAM is a farming approach that was created by a guy named Young-Sung Cho. This is his book, and no, this is not the cover of the book. Our kids tore it off because they liked it so much. But we've got the back cover. This is the book. I've read through this several times now. It is an incredible resource that we have found so helpful. In this book, Young-Sung Cho, he's a Korean natural farmer. He outlines his whole process for how he has developed new technologies that are kind of a cross between natural farming approaches and the conventional side. He outlines a really cool, just general philosophy about gardening in general, and he points out some really helpful things. And so that's what we're going to cover today. I just want to outline everything that he talks about in this book. And we're going to put a link in the description to where you can get this book on Amazon. This, I would highly recommend that you check it out. I will say that I've had to read this, it might be like 3 or 4 times through at this point to really fully start to grasp what he's getting at. And part of the reason for that is that it was originally written in Korean and then it was translated to English. And the English translation is problematic. At some points, it can be a little bit confusing to read, and it's also got a lot of Eastern philosophy woven in to the techniques. And he talks about how he is sort of one with nature and whatnot. Like he is the expert, or I am the expert. All of us are the expert about how to engage with these processes. So it's interesting to kind of wade through some of his philosophy and get to the techniques, but then to kind of understand it all, you really do have to understand the underlying principles. Let's talk about some of those. One caveat before we go any further is that just like any other natural farming technique, it's worth pointing out that this particular technique, the JADAM organic farming method, has really worked well for us. And it might not work well for you. That probably goes without saying, but I don't want anyone to say, I've tried it and, a JADAM and it doesn't work at all and there's no science behind it. Okay, it's not gonna work for everyone, of course, but there actually could be some of the techniques that you hear about today and you wanna try them out, and they actually do work for you. Listen to this with an open mind. I really think that there could be some extremely valuable information, especially if you identify with the problem that I mentioned early on of, I want food and I want to do it in an environmentally sustainable way and save money. How do I do both? This actually could be a legitimately really helpful approach. He calls this the way to ultra low cost farming or agriculture. This is really very ultra low cost, I will say. A few points about the underlying philosophy. The first main point that he really tries to convey is that when you look at nature, you're seeing it done right. You're seeing agriculture done right. Now, in the same breath, he acknowledges that agriculture is not a natural process, but what we observe in nature, similar to what permaculturists would say, is that nature, it has these incredible processes that you just have to look at and see in order to actually know how to translate that to your unnatural farming techniques or agriculture, gardening techniques. The first step is just acknowledging that nature does it right though. If you go out into a forest, like a natural forest that hasn't been touched, there's no added chemicals or sprays or anything like that. And yet in untouched forests, there's like no disease. There's no pest pressure that's overburdening unless humans have kind of gotten in there and messed up the ecosystem. If it's untouched, the natural processes are running and it's just these perfect cycles. Everyone has a role, that sort of thing. So that's the first thing. Within that mindset, Young-Sung Cho makes a controversial argument, and that is that there is no such thing as bad microbes. Now, this definitely comes with a lot of caveats because there are some microbes that are not beneficial to human flourishing. But the point that he makes is actually pretty good, is that in a lot of our natural gardening approaches and conventional approaches, we're really scared of anaerobic conditions in the garden. Perhaps if you have made compost in the past and you are trying to do a hot compost pile and you got to add in the right amount of moisture, enough so that the microbes can travel through the compost, but not too much, because if you add too much, then it can go anaerobic. It's possible you've heard that before, and basically what's happening there is that you're just acknowledging the presence of unhelpful bacteria that can overheat your pile or cause certain types of rotting that aren't helpful. Now, in the JADAM approach, Young-Sung Cho says that in nature there's plenty of putrefaction or putrefaction happening. Animal bodies decompose and they putrefy. Some animals die and their body ends up in the water and they dissolve into the water, into the pond, and they feed microbial life. They just are a part of the natural process of the biological processes that are happening in nature. And so he says it's really important to actually acknowledge that soil itself is both aerobic and anaerobic in different places and at different times. So if you only saturate your soil with aerobic bacteria and fungi and yeast, the microbes that you have in there won't be ready when anaerobic conditions hit your soil, because there'll be time when your soil is fully saturated and you can't do anything about it. So you need your microbes to actually survive. And so he advocates for a bunch of diversity. We got to get the aerobic microbes in there and the anaerobic microbes in there. And I'll get into exactly how, but that's a key principle of the JADAM technique. Another basic principle that's attached to this is the value and the importance of leaf mold soil. In the godfather of JADAM, which is Korean natural farming, there's a central tenet, which is the importance of indigenous microorganisms. And these are the microbes that you find in the untouched forest, in nature, that I was talking about. And Young-Sung Cho just refers to these as leaf mold soil. So if you walk through a deciduous forest, the leaves have fallen down, they have covered the ground, there's no bare soil, and at the lowest layers, they've started to decompose, maybe they've thoroughly decomposed, and the soil directly below that, because of the nutrient qualities and components of leaves, the microbes that have developed directly below the bottom layer of the leaf litter are extremely strong. They're really robust microbes, and those are what you're going to culture and cultivate in order to introduce to your garden. So there's a huge value of leaf mold soil. The way that you collect it is very different from KNF, or Korean natural farming. Another guiding principle or philosophy behind JADAM is that you don't want to rotate your crops. And this goes against a lot of natural farming wisdom, or like even a lot of conventional farming wisdom, that says that if you just farm the same plant in the same place year after year, you're going to deplete the soil of its nutrients, the specific nutrients that that plant needs to get. That totally makes sense. If you're just drawing up phosphorus over and over and over again, year after year after year, your soil probably will be depleted of phosphorus. However, in the JADAM approach, you're doing so much work to nurture specific areas of soil that are correlated with the crop that you'll grow there. And so we'll get into exactly how this plays out later on in this video in a little bit, but essentially, crop rotation is a no-no in the JADAM framework. The final thing that I think is worth mentioning is that in JADAM, Young-Sung Cho really acknowledges the presence and just the reality of pests and disease, pests and plant disease. These things are just because of the way that we've treated the soil, because of the way that other people around you might use these sprays and whatnot. Like, it's possible that neighbors on all sides use pesticides. So where are all the pests going to go? To your yard. So you got to do something. Even just beyond that, even if that wasn't the case, at the end of the day, people need to eat. And so what Young-Sung Cho is really trying to do is actually create some systems that work, that help agriculture progress and actually continue to the point where we don't have to be reliant on the chemicals that you buy from the store, but also there's plenty of food for people to actually eat at the end of the day. So those are some of the underlying principles and just general philosophy behind the JADAM approach. So let's get into the methods, the actual inputs that JADAM actually centers around. So in order to start a brand new garden bed utilizing the JADAM approach, there's really just a couple steps that he recommends. First of all, you do a one-time till of the area that you want to plant in. So this one-time till is just to initially set the soil in the area that you're going to be planting into. You'll never till it again, but in a lot of cases, maybe in most cases, possibly not in yours, but in a lot of cases you do need to work up the soil a little bit so that it has some fluff and your plant roots can actually go down into it and aren't just hitting a solid wall of clay. So you till up the soil, you decide what crops are going to go in what areas, because then they're going to stay there. And of course, if you need to move them later on, that's probably fine. But ideally, you're planting the same crops in the same beds year after year. You are establishing occultation and weed suppression through use of plastic tarps. This is controversial because it's plastic, but what he recommends is you just buy really high quality landscape fabric or tarps that don't wear down. They take years to start breaking down, and you cover your soil because this is going to actually help keep all of the moisture and the nutrients locked in. They're not going to evaporate and be destroyed by the sunlight. On top of the fact, you're going to just save a lot of time not weeding, and you won't have to rely on herbicides and all of that. So this is, I think, a pretty decent argument to make that actually just using plastic tarps in certain cases is really helpful. It saves time and it's effective. Finally, the last step is to apply your soil amendments, and these are all liquid amendments for the most part. There's a number of them that basically you're going to use to inhabit your soil with microbes and the correlated nutrients that your plants need in order to grow effectively. Some basics about the actual gardening inputs. There's a very simple one that he recommends, and that is just his basic mineral water. All you have to do to make this one is fill up a bucket or a barrel full of water, and then you put some large rocks in it, and you just let that sit for a while, and the water becomes generally mineralized. I should say, you also always are going to add a pinch of leaf mold soil. Into the mineral water, you add some leaf mold soil, and the microbes in there will start to help break down the rocks and distribute minerals throughout the water. That's the first gardening input that he covers in his book. The second one is the primary one. This is the foundation for all of JADAM, and it is the JADAM Microbial Solution, or JMS. Now, JMS is when you take leaf mold soil, again, the soil found directly below the leaf litter in an untouched forest, and you culture it with a carbohydrate of some kind in water. So this is an anaerobic fermentation. The microbes in the leaf mold soil feed on a carbohydrate in the water, in your bucket, and we usually do this in 5-gallon buckets because we dilute it heavily. But you basically let this sit for a number of days. It could happen in as little as 2 days if the weather is warm enough. If it's a little bit cooler, it might take up to 5 days. But you're watching to see if bubbles form. And so, the basic way that you do this is you take a sack of some sort of perforated, we usually use like some cheesecloth, or a paint strainer is actually the best for this. And you put some leaf mold soil in, you put a potato in that's been cooked, and you put some sea salt, and you just crush it up into the bucket of water. This has to be dechlorinated water, of course, because the chlorine will kill the microbes. And then you hang the potato and the leaf mold soil in the bucket, and it cultures. And this is an incredible process. I mean, we've done this so many times. You basically make this solution, and this is your JMS, your microbial solution that you can apply to your soil. If there's no plants in the ground, you'll apply this undiluted. You just water it straight in. You really want to time this when it rains in your area so that the rain can carry the microbes further down into the soil. This is the first blast of robust microbes that your soil is going to experience. And you want to do this routinely, even like just throughout the whole season, so that your soil is staying saturated, gradually being introduced to these really awesome microbes. The JADAM microbial solution is the foundation for everything. You really need the microbes in your soil, and the reason for that is because microbes are the nutrient delivery system for the plant roots. What you can do, and this is what a lot of conventional agriculture does, is you can apply a fertilizer or nutrients to the top layers of the soil. And the plant roots are in the top layers, and they don't really have to move or look around for the nutrients. They just find them immediately, and the plant grows up, and it's great. But in nature, the way that this works is through an exchange, and the exchange is from plant root exudates. These are sugars or carbohydrates that the plant roots exude that attract microbes. The microbes come carrying nutrients that the plant needs, and they do an exchange. It's a swap. The microbe feeds on the root exudate, and the plant root gets the nutrient. And this is such a complex, incredible system that soil biologists are really just starting to fully kind of grasp the implications of. But essentially, it's been starting to be observed that plant roots will literally send out unique signals to the soil biology saying, I need this exact nutrient. And their root exudate is correlated with that. And so microbes that have that nutrient will be triggered or will be alerted to go and deliver the nutrient and get the root exudate. Incredible thing. That's why we need microbes. That's why we need biology in our soil. And on top of that, microbes help digest the organic material in the soil and break it down into bioavailable nutrients for plant roots. And this is the same process that happens when you ferment a food like kimchi. If you ferment sauerkraut, the microbes are breaking down the cabbage so that it's more digestible and so that nutrients are unlocked. In kefir, we actually can see vitamin K1 in milk being converted to vitamin K2 because the microbes are busy at work converting it themselves. They're pre-digesting it. So anyway, so that's why we need microbes in the soil. The second input goes hand in hand with that, and that is your JADAM liquid fertilizers, or JLF. Now JLF, we've come out with several videos on this. This is a very simple but effective process. So what you're doing is you're making a plant fertilizer from plant debris. And the basic one that you can make is an all-purpose fertilizer. You can use grass clippings, is a great option that most people have access to. And you're just going to put the grass clippings in a bucket with some leaf mold soil, water. This organic material will slowly break down. And by slowly, I mean it can take maybe a week or two before it's really actually ready to use. It won't be super strong, but the soil microbes in the leaf mold soil will actually go to work and start to pre-digest the organic material of the grass and breaking it down into plant available nutrients. So that fertilizer becomes what you then feed to your soil, to where your plants are growing, and the microbes that are there and that have been used to break down the nutrients will then feed your plants. This is an example of an all-purpose fertilizer. Now for both of these inputs, for the JADAM microbial solution and the JADAM liquid fertilizer, the incredible research that Young-Sung Cho has done is in actually just observing these processes on a microscopic level. He's actually tested so many of these different versions, these customized versions of the microbial solution and the liquid fertilizer, and study them under a microscope and actually seen that there's unique compounds and things that are created when you use different plants. And so where I'm going with this is that his general philosophy, this is why crop rotation is not allowed in JADAM, is that Young-Sung Cho's general philosophy with this, or understanding, is that if you make the microbial solution and you incorporate tomatoes into the mix along with the potato, the microbes that will proliferate and expand and bubble up are going to be uniquely suited to breaking down nutrients and delivering nutrients found in tomatoes, and therefore they'll be the best and the most effective in delivering those nutrients to tomato plants. So this is a very quick way of explaining this process. You can read all about it in his book, where he outlines exactly how it works. But this is the same thing with the JADAM liquid fertilizers. If you want to make a tomato-specific fertilizer, you can actually just decompose or putrefy tomato plant in water with the leaf mold soil, and it will make a tomato-specific fertilizer. You can do this with strawberries. You use strawberries, leaf mold soil, water in a bucket. There you go. It's a strawberry fertilizer. And it sounds like this is almost, I think when you first hear about this, it feels like it's too simple for it to possibly be true. But we've actually been using this for a while now, and it seems to work great. Not only that, more importantly, there's actually a good amount of science to break this down. He has fully studied the nutrient composition of different liquid fertilizers and what they look like under a microscope and whatnot, and there is a significant difference. There are the unique nutrients that you need in these customized fertilizers. So those are the two basic amendments or inputs that you need to address nutrient deficiencies and soil biology in the JADAM system. So now let's actually go to the other side of the spectrum and talk about how we defend plants against disease and pests. So within the suite of JADAM inputs, there are three main amendments that you will make. And these are very different from the first two that I talked about, or the first three, I guess, with the mineral water. But these three amendments are the JADAM wetting agent, JADAM sulfur, and the JADAM herbal solution. The herbal solution is actually pretty similar. You're basically boiling certain herbs that have been identified as things that make pests want to flee from your plants, and you're extracting a good amount of the compounds from those plants, and you're using it to spray on your plants. Now you could do that, and you can do that with things like really spicy peppers or chilies, capsicum. These compounds are unpleasant for most plants, and probably for humans. If you were to go and lick a plant that was sprayed with capsaicin, that would be probably very unpleasant. Same with garlic. This is another natural herbal kind of solution. The trick is actually getting these things to stick to the plants, and that's where the wetting agent comes in. You can buy wetting agents that from the store that will help the whatever you're spraying on your plant foliarly to actually stick. But of course, when you buy it from the store, you don't fully know what is actually in it. And a lot of these wetting agents are harmful for the environment. They're actually harmful for soil biology. That's obviously, you don't want to harm the precious microbes that you just put in the soil. So Young-Sung Cho invented a incredible way to make an actual wetting agent. It's a soap or a surfactant that you make without doing any heating. You don't have to use a stove. You're literally just mixing chemicals. We'll put a link to our video on exactly how to make that. It's a pretty complex process that you definitely want to be really careful with. You need to get specific ingredients to make that and mix them very carefully. So check out our video on how to do that. This is a very crucial part of the JADAM pest management suite though. And so there's the JADAM wetting agent. I already mentioned the JADAM herbal solution. And then in the middle, we've got JADAM sulfur. And when I first read about the JADAM sulfur, I heard sulfur and I thought, okay, sulfur, isn't that like toxic? Why are we spraying sulfur on our plants? I kind of associated with chemical warfare or just this like very harmful, chemical substance. But the interesting thing is that sulfur can, of course, in certain forms can be really harmful for human health, for plant health. But the form that you're actually making it in as its basic plant safe form is just that, it's plant safe. And sulfur is a really crucial nutrient that plants need, on top of the fact that it does a really good job at suppressing pathogenic fungi and bacteria. So a lot of what we're doing is putting healthy fungi and bacteria into your soil, but then there's the kind of the dark side, which is the pathogens. And these are things like powdery mildew and blight, black spots on the plant. So you go out to your cukes like we have in the past, and they're just kind of getting eaten by this white film, and then they're suddenly dead the next day. What a bummer. Well, the JADAM sulfur actually does a lot of work to solve that problem. The sulfur compound is not metabolizable, who knows if that's a word, by the pathogenic fungi. And so when it does, it actually just kills it. What Young-Sung Cho has done in his research is actually found that this is in no way harmful to humans. In fact, it actually he's used it to help clear up toenail fungus or athlete's foot. And of course, if you have sensitive skin, you probably don't want to be rubbing sulfur all over your body, and it probably smells a little bit, but this otherwise is very safe for humans. You can just wash it off of your vegetables or fruits once you pick them. And that's really the key to all of this, is that all of these amendments, at the end of the day, you just wash them off your plants and they've done their job. The incredible, really the magic of JADAM, the whole suite, is that when you combine all of these things, when you combine the microbial solution and the liquid fertilizers and the wetting agent and the sulfur and the herbal solution, you make this incredible all-purpose spray that you just put on your plants. And you can take certain things out or add different things in if you want to make different, customized sprays and whatnot for different plants or different parts of your yard. Maybe some parts of your yard don't need it. Other parts are just being brutalized by pest pressure or disease. You basically make whatever spray you need that is water soluble and not harmful for the environment. It actually feeds soil biology in a lot of ways, healthy soil biology. This is why I think natural farming could actually work. There are people like Young-Sung Cho creating these incredible frameworks for actually meeting you in the middle. You actually do need to address disease pressure and pest pressure. You can't just ignore that. But how do we do it in a sustainable way? I think that this is actually a very legitimate approach that we have embraced, and we are actually more fully embracing. We are making sure that we have all of our kind of natural pesticide suite completed before the gardening season for next year. So we're making our JADAM sulfur right now. We've got our wetting agent made, and we'll be making our herbal solution, just another big batch of herbal solution that we'll be able to spray on our plants to get it to stick. And guys, we'll be coming out with plenty of videos on these in the future. We've come out with a lot of these videos already, so you can check those out. Now, if you want to get a head start on making your own liquid fertilizer, we've got a PDF that is completely free to download. You can just click the link in the description, and it actually just tells you exactly how to make it, tells you about the dilution rates, how to apply it and whatnot. So make sure that you get that. And if you really want to get into JADAM more fully, you should definitely check out our video on the microbial solution, the JMS. So check out that video, and we'll see you in the next one.